Heck yeah, rugged hardware for consumers. Hey there, this episode of Some Gadget Guy is brought to you by viewers like you, all of the incredible people sharing content on social media, and the amazing generosity of my patrons at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. More info on those awesome nerds later in the video. Alright, the team at 8849 sent this my way to test drive and share some thoughts. This is the Tank Pad. I'm a little giddy about it because I've spent some time on this channel covering rugged hardware in the past. And often we get to a point in our laptop videos where I have to explain that rugged hardware isn't often sold to consumers and this is gonna be crazy expensive, yada yada yada. And that's not gonna happen here. The Tank Pad is being sold to consumers directly, and it's not crazy expensive. This is a brutally built and feature complete appliance of a tablet. It's the kind of hardware that would have blown my mind when I was a Boy Scout, and it addresses some of my issues with the 8849 Tank phones. A brief tangent. I feel I need to spell something out for folks that have watched my Tank phone reviews. I stand by this statement. It's not a good phone. The 3S is a telecommunication computing appliance, but I still think there's a good argument for a small niche group of consumers, maybe someone who wants a weekender phone, or for folks who really get into hiking and camping, or folks off the grid lifestyles. Now, I mean this literally. It's not a tricky statement or something clickbaity. The act of pulling a communication device out of a pocket, using it for apps and services, and putting it back in a pocket, the Tank phones aren't great. They're bulky and heavy and cumbersome. All the things that we traditionally look to on a modern phone, the Tank phone is a more complicated experience. But if you need a durable, outdoor, rugged communication device with ridiculous battery life, that's what you're shopping for. And you have to know you're making some compromises on the traditional phone form factor. It's a lot different than just slapping a rugged bumper on a regular phone. But translating that ruggedness into a tablet experience makes a lot of sense in my brain. The Tank Pad immediately softens the edges around a lot of those compromises. It's really similar to the Tank phone, just stretched out to an 11-inch display. I'll put out a list of specs. It's gonna read about the same, and we can jump through this pretty quick. We've got the brilliant MediaTek Dimensity 8200, snappy and powerful, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. It's a full-featured communication gadget. Dual SIM card, 5G, and with memory card expansion. 21,000 milliamp hour battery. At some point, do we just say it's a 21 amp hour battery where 66 watt charging is basically mandatory? We got a decent LCD at 120 hertz and a chunky frame built to IP69 and mil-spec 810H certifications. Water resistance that kind of blows my mind, just like on the Tank phones, because we have a built-in standard definition projector and active cooling for that projector. We've got holes in ports and vents, but we maintain a rugged IP rating. Plus it has a camera on the front and on the back too. Probably not gonna use those a whole lot except for like video calling. There's a completely different philosophy to building rugged, and the 8849 label has been doing some interesting things in this market. I've had friends who went van life or just enjoy extended outdoor excursions. You know, how you manage tech is a lot different. While Tank Pad might seem big and heavy, a little clunky, the hope is it should save space and weight against using multiple other gadgets. You can work on a larger screen, plenty of performance for fun stuff, multimedia and gaming, and then you shouldn't need a travel TV or a portable monitor when you fire up the projector. Tackling multiple roles, extended time in between charges, and durable. So you don't need to baby it on the go. My concern was that this was just gonna be a blown up version of the Tank phone, but we are running the proper tablet interface. There's an expectation that you could use this as a communications device. All of the Google messaging and Google phone apps are pre-installed. Calls and texts, they're here alongside the charmingly poorly translated menus and alerts peppered throughout the UI. It's Android 14 installed out of the box, and precious little pre-installed bloat. There's a universal remote app for the IR blaster and FM radio, which Still needs headphones connected to make it work. I was hoping that there'd be enough room in here for a built-in antenna. You can activate a student mode if you need to customize this for a kid. And then the 8849 toolbox, which has a collection of these cute little applets and practical little tools you might want for odd jobs around the house. Controls for the camping lantern if you need it really bright. It's even funnier when you need to clear the data for your compass. But look, now I've got cardinal directions. Bubble level, noise test, alarms, there's pressure sensitivity, underwater camera controls, or maybe you just need to fire up that weird red and blue light flashing thing to simulate a stop by law enforcement. Honestly, not sure why that's on these phones, but it's here if you need a warning simulator. But I also just dig that we can get in and do things like customize the fan speed. Even if you don't need it for the projector, you can use this to help cool some of the internals for when you're doing more strenuous tasks. Or use the vibration motors and those speakers to do things like get water out of the system if this goes for a swim. There's an expectation that this will go outside. Now, other than those apps and the Google Suite, there's not much else. The user has to add the apps and services they want. And the projector up here in the top corner is an example of a streamlined feature. It mirrors the main display and eventually shuts the screen off because you're probably watching from the projector and don't need the screen. There's no fancy interface, no extended view mode. It's simply a screen share. You have to focus manually on this little dial here on the side. Just like the Tank phones, the resolution is a little low and the pixel arrangement might look a bit blocky, depending on the scene and what kind of surface you're projecting on, but it's a practical way to fire up a movie or watch some TV. You probably won't use it for a home theater or to replace your TV at home, but that's a luxury feature when you're out on a camp out or you're living the van life. The only part of this media experience, which is a bit weak, the speakers are definitely thin. With all the space here, I was hoping for something a bit fuller sounding than on the Tank phones. It's usable and it's decently loud, but it won't sound as good, it won't sound as nice as premium tier phone speakers or pairing this with like a little Bluetooth speaker. Which brings us to the battery life. The massive capacity here should enable days of use out in the field, but the larger screen means a little less runtime than the Tank phone. And the Tank Pad has a slower charger than the Tank Phone 3 Pro. My normal battery life tests really don't mean much in this context. You really gotta tax this thing to see those battery numbers change in what would be days of use, like firing up the projector. I streamed an hour of Jeepers Creepers through this projector, a little over 60 minutes of video streaming, not a video file living on the tablet, as the tablet reports its own battery drained just a little bit more than 10%. Someone more familiar with travel solutions will have to let me know how many portable projector options there are on the market that can do roughly 10 hours of constant projector use before they'd need to be recharged. I can't imagine there are very many sold in sort of an all-in-one device form factor. Using the tablet as a regular tablet, we're talking about days of actual use. And that runtime is appreciated because the charging is a little slow. Even at 66 watts, it's one big hunk of battery. I kind of want to put this in perspective. Like, I have the OnePlus Pad 2, and if I watch an hour of video at maximum brightness, that's about 30% of the OnePlus's battery. This uses a lot less battery to fire a projector. And we're bringing this in for a landing. I feel we do something obnoxious with rugged. Durable should cost more. It's built different. But then we also saddle a lot of work machines with the bare minimum specs for computing. The Dimensity here is not the crown jewel most powerful chip from MediaTek, but it's a premium tier performer. I don't have to do that thing where I say, oh, it's okay if we can't play games or do more work because it's built so rugged. Because I really miss the days of Samsung active phones. Those were some of my favorites. And I think the folks interested in this concept would probably prefer both the rugged shell and the higher tier of performance. When we build for long-term support contracts, devices get really expensive. The Panasonic Android tablet I reviewed years ago sold for a couple grand, and it still goes for over $1,000 today when you're shopping it on eBay. Those specs aren't great. I would not expect the same longevity of software support, but $88.49 is pricing this at $999 full MSRP, and it's already listed on sale for $799. That puts it in territory where it's not hard finding a higher performance tablet around that same price, but ain't nothing gonna last this long out in the field. It lives at the periphery. By design, it is not average consumer, which I think is really fun. There's a very specific purpose and audience for something like this, where the claims being made by $88.49, I think the target audience will really dig it. It's audacious, it's big, it's a little clumsy, but it's not priced outlandishly. And overall, just a little bit of philosophy on rugged, I think this tablet makes just a little more sense for this idea than the tank phones, but that's just me. Drop me a comment down below. Maybe I have this totally wrong, and maybe the phone form factor makes a lot more sense when you're trying to take this out on the road. Because I love digging into all the different types of gadgets that we have. A phone isn't one thing. A tablet isn't one thing. We have different devices for different consumers' needs. And the folks who get to see the results of my testing first are my incredible patrons. All of the folks over on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. The list that's scrolling up on your screen, these are the folks directly responsible for helping to keep the lights on here in the Gadget Lab. They're basically the coolest nerds in the universe, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere these days, but I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, the Blue Skies, a little less so on the Facebooks and the Threads and the Instagrams, and definitely not much at all on the Twitters, and I will catch you all on the next review.